All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you might be. My name is Ravi Verma, and I'm here with one of my buddies and role models, Agile coach Mike Torrence from Improving. So
Hello
we are
there.
gathered here today. Hey, Mike, we are gathered here today to explore how might we engineer and enable self-managing teams. Next slide, please, Mike. All right. Some housekeeping. We've got a ton of interest on this topic, more than 600 questions. So we know that this is relevant to you, and we would love for you to interact with us. There are a couple of ways. You can post your thoughts on the chat panel, and you can also post your questions on the Q&A panel. So I will be monitoring those, and I will try my best to weave your thoughts, your questions and comments into the flow of the webinar. What we'll do is we'll probably make a quick pass through the 10 tips that Mike is here to share with us. And then we will reserve time at the end of this webinar to answer as many questions as we can. So please do keep sharing your thoughts and your comments. Next slide, Mike, please. All right, let's tell you a little bit about Scrum.org. We are a mission-based organization founded by Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum. And the mission is to help the world solve complex problems. And the way we do it is we offer training, we help you assess your understanding of Scrum and other topics, and we provide free, curated, high-quality content that you can use to advance your learning at your own pace. And you don't even have to pay any money because it's all free online. Okay, so that's a little bit about us. Next slide, please. All right, a little bit about me. So I am a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer, and I'm also the founder of Smooth Apps, which is an agile coaching training consulting firm, and Al Dente, which is a product, a SaaS product that helps with evidence-based agile transformation. And I think what I'm most passionate about is disrupting the needless waste of human potential in the name of Agile and Scrum. So if you want to know more about me, go to smoothapps.com. If you think I can help you with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, next slide. Let's talk about Mike. So Mike is one of the most amazing and inspiring Agile coaches I've had the pleasure to meet. As you can notice, he has a massive set of certifications from different bodies. And Mike is right now an Agile coach and a consultant at Improving, which I think is one of the most reputed and respected organizations in the Agile industry. And Mike and I have worked together, I would say for, has it been 5 years? I've lost track.
4 years.
4 years, yeah. So I met Mike when Mike joined a program called Agile For Patriots, where we offer agile training, coaching, mentoring to US military veterans. So Mike is a veteran from the US Navy. So I'm very grateful to him for his service to our nation. And then as Mike went through the program, I realized I was in the presence of greatness. And I actually hired Mike at a client, and I had a chance to learn from him. So what I'm excited about today is that you will get a chance to learn from a fellow practitioner, not a trainer like me who flies in, delivers training and flies out, but you will actually get a chance to learn from the wisdom of the hard-earned wisdom of a fellow practitioner who's actually facing the challenges that you face day in and day out. Mike, what else would you like us, our listeners, to know about you?
Well, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and to have a mentor like Ravi. Hope to be Ravi 2.0 someday. But I do like to learn. But I also understand not just learning, taking what you learn and applying it and practicing it. So I'm hoping to share some of the insights that I got from training, but also from the real life experience. And I was fortunate to have Ravi as my enterprise agile coach, so I got to learn with one of the best there too. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with the global community.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Next slide, please. All right. So some context about how you might get the most from this webinar. First, One thing that Mike and I have realized after having done this in many companies is that if we just go to an engagement and we deliver some intro to Agile or intro to Scrum training, it's possible, but it's unlikely that that will be sufficient to engineer a high-performing self-managing team. We've been in situations where just flying in, delivering training, and flying out can actually create more damage, because now people will weaponize the jargon that we have given them and use that jargon as weapons to settle old scores. So we've been experimenting with different clients to try and figure out what's the next step after you do an intro to Agile or intro to Scrum training. What else needs to happen to increase the probability of the emergence of a self-managing high-performing team? And through a lot of experiments, we've identified 10 major barriers, and we have noticed that there are 10 adjustments that have typically helped us increase the degree of self-management in the teams that we are coaching. So that's what we are going to share today. Couple of things for you to watch out for. These are not best practices. So it's unlikely that you do the exact same thing that Mike did that worked in one of his client engagements, and you just do a copy paste in your engagement and expect that it's going to work. These are not best practices. These are experiments. So listen to the experiment, customize it and adapt it to your unique situation, and deploy a short controlled experiment. See what happens, learn from it, and rinse and repeat. So please avoid the pitfall of treating what Mike is sharing as a one size fits all silver bullet that will work in every engagement. So that's one point. I would also request you to listen from a particular place, listen from a place of curiosity and openness. Watch out for the pitfall where no matter what Mike says, the voice inside of your head says, no, but that's never going to work in my case. If it turns out that for 10 tips that Mike gives, for every single tip, your reaction is that's never going to work, maybe you're in the wrong place. Okay, so listen with curiosity and openness. And I'll say one last thing, and then we'll dive in. Mike and I are in Texas. We are experiencing some pretty frigid weather, severe weather by Texas standards. So we've got freezing rain, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the Texas power grid doesn't fail. But if it does fail, I'm apologizing in advance. We'll do some course correction. Maybe Lindsay will take over the presentation and we'll do the best we can. So if it becomes bumpy, please accept our apologies in advance. So that's how I wanted to set it up. Mike, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience in terms of how to listen and how to get the best from this webinar?
I would just say that I might not always have, when I speak with Ravi about these things, I may not always have a success story. It may be a challenge that I had to keep going up against. But I understand in my head and from all the knowledge that I've gathered that these would have been great opportunities. But they're also sometimes they're just some uphill battles that you have to consistently fight and not give up. Be willing to die on the hill sometimes, but like you said, it's not a catch-all. This isn't just a blueprint. These are some things that worked for me, and maybe sometimes they didn't work, but I knew that they were right, or maybe there was some middle ground.
Yeah. So maybe, Mike and I haven't figured everything out. So maybe in some cases we won't be able to say, yes, try this, is going to work for you. We might say, you know what, I have no clue what's going to work for you, but this didn't work for us. So maybe we can give you a shortcut. We can avoid you going down a path which has typically not worked for us. All right. Okay. Mike, let's dive in. Next slide, please. All right. So 10 challenges. So the first challenge, Mike, that I've seen very often is unclear accountabilities. So we introduce Scrum. We tell them there are 3 accountabilities. You've got developer, product owner, and Scrum Master. And people are searching, where do I fit in? And sometimes people can't figure out where they fit in, or they have a flawed understanding. Where does a project manager fit in? What if I'm a database developer and there's not enough database work? What if I'm a .NET developer and somebody is asking me to learn database? That's not why you hired me. These are, where does business fit in? What does a product owner do? So these are some common questions that I've seen swirling around in terms of where do I fit in? What is my accountability? What's worked for you in terms of creating more clarity around accountabilities when you launch a Scrum team or reboot a Scrum team?
I think that's just it. You work with the team and with the business, with the stakeholders to talk about the accountabilities. There's a reason the Scrum Guide talks about accountabilities and artifacts and events, and it's because there's a purpose for all of them. And when we're trying to exercise the agility mindset and the Scrum framework, if you blur those lines, if you have some possible remnants of waterfall from before, you inject those into the team sometimes, that can actually damage some of the things you're trying to achieve with empiricism, with transparency, inspection, adaptation. So I've seen where we had to continue to echo, hey, these are the accountabilities. You might be a technical project manager on the team, but you're bridging the gap between the developers on the technical and the business. Product owner might not be full time, so you're helping in both capacities, but you still need to assume accountability. You can't just be a technical project manager. So you can still have a project management office, and there's still value in having those things, but having it inside the team, that becomes a challenge. So I had to consistently work, with one of my clients, work on that challenge to not let the voices inside the team that weren't assuming the proper accountability take over and influence or damage psychological safety, or take the voices away, make the quiet people even more quiet. So there's a place for everything in there. Obviously, the business needs to bring the vision, and then the Scrum Master needs to be accountable for the process and helping the team get better, and the developers do the work. So there's a place for everyone, but if they don't understand where their piece of the puzzle is and what it is that they're bringing to the table, that can actually have adverse effects on delivering value.
Very cool. And one technique that I learned from Ralph Jochum, one of our best trainers, was applying Management 3.0 delegation poker to Scrum. So if we can use a technique like delegation poker to provide clarity on who gets to make what kind of decision in the different areas. So what are the kind of decisions that product owner gets to make? What are the decisions that developers get to make? What are the decisions that Scrum Master gets to make? And what are the decisions that external stakeholders or maybe management gets to make? That can reduce the hurt feelings, resentments, and disconnects around, hey, wait a minute, that's not my job. Wait a minute, that is my job. So thank you so much for sharing that, Mike. Let's go to the next one.
I love that practice too.
Yeah.
There's actually, Ravi, there's a great question that came in the same vein. If you don't mind me interjecting quickly. So my team is stuck in the mindset of hierarchical teams. Some of the team members micromanage their team and prevent sprint independence, but also look to the product owner for every small decision. How can I help lower their fear?
Such a great question. Mike, any thoughts you have seen, or what has worked or not worked in terms of psychological safety, fear of making decisions?
Yeah, I think that sounds like, the coaching needs to take place on the accountabilities for sure. Working with the product owner, working with the developers, the Scrum value courage for the developers to actually take on some of the decision making, working with the product owner, having the courage to say, hey, you need to let more decisions be made on how, especially. But if it's just needing to hear about the what, then obviously you want that communication. It shouldn't be the hierarch decision-making process that dictates how things are done. As you've probably heard, the decision should be made where the work is done. So I think you would just need to coach and get that responsibility and be brave if you're a Scrum Master to ask for that autonomy to, hey, the team needs to make the best decisions. Let's empower them to make some small experiments, decisions, ask clarifying questions when needed, but not necessarily wait for other people to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah, and Lindsay, we do have a specific tip that Mike will share later on, but I can give you a sneak peek. That's about the working agreement. So if we describe, let's imagine you're a Scrum Master like Mike, you join the team, whether it's already a Scrum team in existence or a new Scrum team, and you explain to them, what does self-management look like, feel like, sound like? So we have an inspiring goal, And now the team and there is a container within which self-organization must occur. So you have to honor the laws of the land, you have to be ethical, professional, and honor the company policies and procedures. Inside of that, as long as you are staying true to Scrum principles and values, there is a lot of autonomy to find the best path to the destination. And then one thing you could do is you could ask the team, as you think about this aspirational vision, what comes up for you? What might stop us? And if people say, I don't feel safe making decisions, then you can explore that. And when you are facilitating a working agreement creation, we could explore, well, what is creating a lack of safety? What's preventing you from making decisions? And how might we be so that that barrier is removed? So we can crowdsource bottom-up intelligence from the team to explore the root causes of lack of psychological safety and how they would like to be in the face of that, so there is greater safety. So working agreement is something, is a technique that might help us address that, but great question. All right, okay, let's go to the second challenge that we've seen, which is we don't have a unifying purpose. So there could be someone who is a testing specialist, and what they are trying to do is they are trying to minimize the number of defects, or they're trying to hit their performance bonus or keep their boss happy, VP of quality. Business could have some other agenda. Someone who's reporting into IT, software development could have another agenda. So everybody is trying to liberate a different angel in the marble. They're all seeing an angel in the marble, but it's different angels. So what happens, Mike, when people are optimizing for different goals? How do you unify them? So it's not a bunch of individuals who are like fighting with each other, but they are a team working towards a shared goal.
What I think is important, is paramount, really, if you're going to start with why, is to have your clear, inspiring destination. So you want a product vision, you want to have product goals, you want to have sprint goals. Everything should inform and go back up to your North Star of why are we here? Who do we serve? I have seen challenges where, like you mentioned, people may be aiming more for a business goal, something that needs to be done that really pressures the team to deliver. And at some point you have no choice. You have to give up something. It's what it felt like in our experiences. We want to build in quality, and we want to do everything the right way, and we want to experiment, we want to try, and we couldn't necessarily get there. It was a coaching opportunity or just discussions to have with the stakeholders for, hey, we should be looking more at our vision and how we want to build using an agile mindset and using the Scrum framework, as opposed to just hitting company goals, because that's part of what you were trying to transform away from, is the waterfall, to go to an agility and an opportunity to work with our customers and pivot and do different things like that. But if we didn't have those goals in place, and if we didn't actually honor them and think about those as the way that we want to do our product delivery, our outcomes would end up suffering one way or another. So sometimes we would, have to make the harder than normal decision for scope reduction, or sometimes the quality would suffer just as an adverse effect. It's a frustrating point. And if really there's not a lot of support for the product vision and the product goals and the buy-in, then you consistently might fight against other goals that are detrimental to the team.
Yeah, and one thing I've seen is sometimes companies will have a traditional waterfall mindset. So maybe in October of the previous year, all the executives will go to a strategic offsite, and they will identify, here are the 12 projects that must be done by next year. Mm-hmm. And they come to the company and they announce it to all of the so-called agile teams that these are the projects you are going to deliver. This is the deadline. And all we do is we use maybe the gimmicks of like a robotic implementation of Scrum, where you break up a waterfall project into 26 mini projects. And all you're trying to do is check the boxes so everybody gets a performance bonus, right? So if you have a company which has that kind of an interpretation of Scrum or Agile, it might be challenging. However, as Mike was saying, if you can influence management to have customer-centric, user-centric, or value-centric corporate goals, corporate vision, and then create customer, user, value-centric product vision, product goal, and sprint goal, then it's easier to get those individuals who are trying to optimize for their departments and sub-optimize for the team or company. It's easier to bring them together as a cohesive team. So these are some techniques which are often neglected. So I would like you to please look at the lack of self-management in your teams through these lenses and see, does this offer you any opportunity for improvement? Right? Next challenge, Mike. Okay, service mindset. So this is something also that, Mike, I think both you and I have seen. The goal seems to be, let me get as many user stories done as possible. Let me get as many features done as possible or epics done as possible. And we are so busy marching down that road of, as a user, I want to do blah, so that blah, that the human being who we exist to serve is nowhere in the picture. It's just PBI after PBI, Jira after Jira ticket. How have you shifted the thinking of your teams away from Jira-based thinking, ticket-based thinking, to human-centric, service-centric thinking?
I think one of the things that helped us the most, I have to credit to some extent the PSU course, Professional Scrum with UX, but it's been there, since before then, to have personas, to actually think of your customers, to think of different people who will be impacted by the work that you're doing. So bringing personas into the team and having them really think, I think PSU brought in a new concept for me, at least, which is a proto persona, which you don't have to take as much time to build out the whole persona, but you can do a quicker rendition of it, but have your teams actually think about, why are we building this, and from whose perspective. As an example, when I first came into one of my client organizations, we consistently went into sprint review and would have something that didn't meet the stakeholder expectations. So the next sprint, we'd be working on fixing that, and then we'd bring it back and we do it again. What we really pushed for from a user experience perspective was to do some mock-ups, get it over there, think about things from their perspective, work with them to build it, to reduce some of the waste of going back and forth and burning time and money in the sprints. So having those personas there, thinking about it from that perspective, actually using some of our tools when we write our user stories, they have the persona field in there. Hey, think about these things. Why are we building this, and for whom? And have we actually showed them and involved them in the work so that we can make this a smoother transition and not have so much waste involved?
Yeah. And I remember attending the PSU workshop by Gary Pedretti, who I think is one of the most amazing PSTs in our community. And actually, he and Eric Weber, they helped us co-create the PSU workshop with Jeff Gothelf and Josh Seiden. And one of the simplest but the most impactful techniques I learned from Gary's workshop was the proto persona. And it won't take you too long. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on research. It's a great starting point to connect the dots between a user story or a Jira item that your team is working on and a human being whose life will be made better. And I think both Mike and I have found that most people on Scrum teams, most developers, are yearning to make a positive impact on another person's life. All we need to do is to tell them, who is this person, what is paining them, and how might the work of the Scrum team address their pain. And that lights up and inspires the team. So if you haven't used personas, a good baby step might be start with proto personas. All right, let's go to the next challenge. Challenge number 4, no outcome-based goals. So many times success is defined as on time, on scope, on budget. And we've all seen cases where you can deliver a project on time, on scope, on budget, but it's a massive failure. It's a massive destruction of time, money, reputation, and human potential because the market has moved on, or there's a misunderstanding between what we thought the market wanted and what the market really wanted. So what's worked or not worked for you, Mike, in overcoming this obstacle?
Well, I think we've touched on it a few times already, having some goals, some vision, and then making sure you're not chopping up a waterfall project into short sprints. To have some small experiments in sprints, to be able to touch the market, to be able to get the feedback from our stakeholders, those different things like that, but have outcome-based goals of delivering some value as opposed to just saying, well, this is our timeline, this is where we are, so that's the percentage that we've already put out, and we're tracking to an annual goal for business. Actually have some outcome-based goals for the team and for the stakeholders and for the product owner to deliver that value out. Yeah, if you can't measure it, and I mean, it shouldn't just be a goal that you can't measure. You want it for the SMART goals. You want goals that you can actually measure, a wildly important goal. What are we going to reduce by when? How will this user know that life is better for them when we've delivered this value?
Very good. Yeah, and Mike, if you could share that tip for number 4. And some techniques that have helped is, as Mike was mentioning, the Franklin Covey 4 disciplines of execution. There's a very nice short video you'll find on YouTube. I think it's by Kenny McChesney. And he gives a very simple approach that can be adapted to the definition of product goals. I think he says the start line, the finish line, and the deadline. So increase market share from 5% to 10% by December 31st, 2023. Or increase revenue or profit or user delight. So if you can use a simple, memorable, measurable way to define success in terms of customer or user or business outcome-centric terms, it's more likely to unleash the self-management within the team, because they will have a measurable goal plus an inspiring vision that they can work towards. And one technique introduced by Scrum.org that can help in this area is evidence-based management. If you're struggling to find out, how can I come up with a business-centric, customer or user-centric goal in the context of my company, look at the evidence-based management guide, which is available for free download, and see if that gives you some ideas to start with. So create a simple, measurable, and a memorable goal, and create a scoreboard that will help you see, are you making progress towards that goal or not? Whether you're making progress or not doesn't matter. The delta between target reality and current reality is where wisdom is waiting to be unlocked. You explore that, you'll get wisdom, and you can course correct. All right, so that takes us to the next challenge. Not getting feedback from the market. So I have been in companies where people are deathly scared of deploying to production. And there is a lot of accumulating inventory or work in process where there is sprint after sprint of work that has been done by many teams, but it's sitting in pre-prod or it's sitting in a development sandbox. It's not seeing the light of day. And there might be like a big bang deployment to production 12 months later. Or sometimes things are being deployed to production, but we are not pausing to see how did the market react, because we are off to our next release, to the next Jira ticket, the next user story. So Mike, what has worked for you in terms of helping the teams get feedback from the market and learn and course correct?
We use outcome-based scoreboard. We also, to touch on the points that you brought up, I have seen that where there was a backup of user stories and code just sitting in QA. I believe the worst case that I saw was 9 months. They just weren't deploying. We finally, in conjunction with our stakeholders in a review, decided, hey, we're not delivering anything, and the longer this stuff sits in QA, the greater the risk is. We haven't deployed it. We haven't checked the market. We don't even know if the code's going to work now with all the environment changes. We need to push. Let's stop starting and start finishing. We actually paused development for, a sprint or two just to get all this code moved into production. And once we did that over a period of time, we finally got to where we were deploying a couple of times a sprint, 2-3 times a sprint. So that was a massive change, and deploying to prod, not just to QA. So getting that out there, getting it to the customer, allowing the customer to actually see what you're developing in iterations instead of doing the big bang. The big bang has got so much risk to it. Saw it a few times, and we were fortunate it didn't bite us, but so risky. So having an outcome-based scoreboard, actually interacting with your customer, seeing how is what we're building in iterations, how is it impacting you? Are you, we don't want to develop 80% of features you're not going to use. We want to know what you're talking about. In fact, one of the good success stories we had was in one of our sprint reviews, we did put Google Analytics inside one of the new websites that we had built. And we were able to show our stakeholders down to one user the exact path and surfing patterns, if you will, of the website and what's of interest to this person. So I think the more you can do that, the more you actually touch the lives of the customers and interact with them and get that feedback. That's part of the whole purpose of agility and the Scrum framework that we use.
Very cool. And Mike, you reminded me of something that I learned in either a Scrum.org EBM class or PSU, the hypothesis-driven delivery. So whenever you have a user story or a product backlog item, if we can articulate our hypothesis inside of that item itself to say, we believe that when this item is deployed to production within 30, 60, 90 days, this is the needle that will move. So customer adoption or feature usage will move from 0 to 20%, or users will start spending an average of 20 minutes per day on this feature. If you quantify your target and your hypothesis, and as Mike was saying, if you build analytics right from the ground up into your definition of done, then as you deliver the item to production, you can look at your analytics to validate, is your hypothesis valid or invalid? And there is no shame in failure. The shame is in failing to learn and adapt. So I love that you brought analytics into it and indirectly hypothesis-driven delivery. Thank you, Mike. All right, what's the next challenge? Let's go to challenge number 6. Activity-based product backlog, feature after feature after feature, story after story, but again, disconnected from outcomes. So Mike, what has worked for you in this case?
I think when you talk about a product owner being an entrepreneur in spirit, and owning the product and being able to stand up to the stakeholders that don't agree, because I've seen different priorities being lobbied for within the business unit of a client organization. Having the product owner, maybe even with some feedback from the team, making sure they interact with the stakeholders to really clearly outline the product vision, the risk of not tackling the right things first. We had a lot of talk about having the outcome-based product backlog instead of just doing work to get it done. I've seen some challenges sometimes with vendors, so that was a quick shift that we had to make, which I felt was agile. We couldn't necessarily address things in the order of value that the POs had put into place, but we pivoted and we had to do what we could as we went along. But if you don't have that organized outcome-based visionary product backlog, if you're just doing work to get it done, then you could have the waste, you could have the risk, you could be, especially if you are trying to deploy to market, if you're not deploying the right things to market, and you're not addressing the cost benefit ratio, the different things that the PO should be able to see to order the backlog, then you could be at risk of being passed up by your competitors or delivering the waste, the features that they don't want, maybe losing the interest. So there's a lot of things that I think we worked with our clients for to make sure that what we're delivering is what the client wants, the customer, and that it brings back value and that we're able to see in that feedback loop to keep going the right direction or to pivot.
Yeah. And one technique that has worked for me is something I learned from Patricia Kong, who's also at Scrum.org, is she taught me in a Scale Professional Scrum class, she introduced a practice of impact mapping. So impact mapping is you take the wildly important goal or the product goal, and then you create a tree which explains what kind of an impact do you want to create in the lives of the human beings you exist to serve. And every product backlog item should be connected to one or more human beings and a positive impact in their lives, and it should be connected back to your product goal. And the discipline of this technique forces us to ask, if you have a product backlog item that is unconnected to your product goal through an impact map, does that product backlog item really belong? Or perhaps you have discovered a new chain of impacts. So if you are struggling with just activity-based backlog items, which are there to keep some powerful stakeholder happy, introducing the rigor of impact mapping might help you transition from an activity-based product backlog to an outcome-based product backlog. All right, Mike, next challenge. Quality standards. So I remember, Ken Schwaber in my PSM 1 training that I attended with Ken in Boston. Excuse me. Yeah, this was the biggest thing that he emphasized, that, Ken was dismayed about the sacrifices we make in terms of product quality in our pursuit for hitting that deadline. And one of his fears was software is permeating almost every area of our life. And if we take shortcuts with quality, it could have irreversible impacts on somebody's life or well-being. So he didn't want us to cut corners in quality. So this has been a very prevalent challenge that I've seen. What's worked for you or not worked when it comes to quality standards?
I think you definitely need a definition of done. If you don't have that, that's, you don't have that commitment to actually have the quality built into the increment. So I've seen a lack of definition of done at the organizational level and at the team level as a result. And as an example, it might still be in QA, not visible to our customers, or it might actually be in production, just flagged off and not ready for them to see it yet. But you could go page to page and see differences in the outlines and the colors. And we actually sat down as a community and community practice, and we said, hey, we need to have an organizational definition of done. So we listed out things that are just, no brainers. We all use the same template. We all use the same colors. We all use everything that we need to be uniform across teams. And it started getting built out. And the great thing is it's a sort of a living thing for us. Is new things come along, someone says, hey, I've got this idea that could help on quality. We'll come up with something called quality review. And that would be taking your peer reviews an extra step. Let's look at, does this meet acceptance criteria? So you put this functionality together with the actual technical portion of it, and it could help reduce the number of defects that make it to QA. And then you run experiments, and then you can say, hey, this worked. We really like it. Let's bring it in definition of done. So then take it to the team level. Everything is additive, not, instead of, and then have the team look for our specific product or what we're working on, this segment of the product. Hey, what can we add to this to improve our quality so that we can reduce defects, get our value delivered more quickly. Let's get to market, get our empiricism, our feedback, and see what we can do better. But definition of done, when it was missing, was just sort of chaos. We had so much rework. We had a lot of defects. We had so much that we had to go learn from or inspect, or caught at an embarrassing level, like maybe a stakeholder catches it in a review and that's not what you wanted. So it's definitely a must. That's what they had in mind when they brought this to us in Scrum, is let's build in quality. Let's find a way to minimize defects and risk and provide value faster.
Very cool. Yeah, and starting with a corporate company-wide DoD is a great first step. What are the non-negotiables that must be honored before we deliver our next solution to market? So if you don't have that, that might be a good place to get started. All right, challenge number 8. So this is related to a whole bunch of questions that we are getting both in the registration and in the Q&A. What if I have a senior developer who's trying to command and control the team? What if I have a product owner who's trying to step on a Scrum Master or invalidating a Scrum Master? What if I have a project manager who's trying to micromanage my team? So this is about cultural expectations. Who will we be? How will we behave? How will we treat each other, especially when things get bumpy under high stress, high pressure environments where things are not going well? So how have you navigated this, Mike? How have you created that culture which is conducive to self-management?
So this is my favorite one. I love working agreements. I can't tell you how many different ways this can work to your benefit, for the team's benefit, for the organization's benefit. Sit down as a team and talk about how will we treat each other? How will we talk to each other? What kind of feedback would you like? What kind of recognition would you like? What's across the line? What's you should never do this. If you start into conflict, how do you agree to deal with me so that we can keep it a healthy conflict instead of one that becomes berating? And that this is another living document that you can keep going through and keep it in. And when you do have these moments where maybe there is some tension and there's some conflict that's not healthy, you can point back to this, like, hey, we said we would do this. What's going on? What's it feel like to be in your shoes that we're not honoring our working agreement? To take this a step further, that would just be within a team setting. What I've seen is different parts of the IT department that help work with the Scrum teams, such as, let's say, an infrastructure team. They may be shorthanded based on the number of teams they have to support, and they get so overwhelmed and everyone's lobbying, hey, mine's high priority. And you get to the point where, well, if everything's high priority, nothing's high priority. Having a working agreement, we've actually done that with those different departments. Like, hey, we know you're overwhelmed. We've got a lot of work. We're all trying to meet some deadlines. What's the best way for us to work with you? If we go through a certain set of steps that you've given us and it's still failing, like, what's our fail safe? What's the on-down cord, if you will, that you can pull and say, hey, we really need to fix this. And we were able to set, one of the maybe more difficult people to deal with sometimes. When we set this out with him, he loved it. He was all in favor of, you do this, I do this, you do this, and we'll work together. Here's your emergency, break it, pull the thing, and we'll do this with you. And it really improved our relationships with them. So working agreements with different departments in business, it's limitless. If you basically explore up front, how as a human being should I deal with you as a human being? What's the way you would prefer for us to have our working relationship? And then if there's a violation of it, you can go back and talk about that. Like, hey, we said we were going to do this. What's happening such that we're not honoring this anymore?
Love it. Love it. I think a lot of suffering in life comes from mismatched expectations. And
Agreed.
A lot of these ideas are, how do I create transparency into my internal expectations of you? And how might you create transparency into your expectations of me and everyone else? And once we get it out in front, let's use the Scrum values, the principles, and our greater corporate mission, vision, purpose, and values as guiding guideposts and guardrails, so that we can align our mismatched expectations in pursuit of the greater goal. So I think a lot of these techniques are about just narrowing down mismatched expectation. I love what you shared, Mike. All right, challenge number 9. All right, forecasting. So this is probably a controversial topic. There are some thought leaders in our industry who prefer no estimates. Some prefer relative estimation. There may be some people who are transitioning from waterfall who prefer to estimate in hours. Ultimately, stakeholders want to figure out, what am I going to get and by when am I going to get it, so that they can manage expectations with their stakeholders. So I'm curious, how have you navigated this potentially like a controversial issue, like a minefield?
Yeah, I think, as you pointed out, it's sort of a controversial topic. I've heard more and more lately. I don't know if it's been out there for a while. To me, it was a little bit new to hear about no estimation. So it's an interesting learning perspective, but I think you should definitely stay in alignment first and foremost. And you also want to be consistent in whatever you choose that works. What we did use in most of my clients was the estimation, relative estimation, using story points and forecasting based on that. One of my hot buttons is, this is an estimate. It's not a delivery. It's not a commitment. It's, hey, you could drive to work for a year, and whatever your best time is, you're probably not going to hit it every time. You're definitely not going to hit it every time. So assuming that you're doing the same work doesn't mean you're going to deliver it at the same time. So I really love estimation techniques that might give you a good forecast. So, we would use relative estimation. What have we done before? How does this complexity relate to that? Based on that, and then only the team using velocity, we could come up with a cone of uncertainty. So we would talk about average being the last 6 sprints as an example. Our our pessimistic would be the worst 3 sprints of the last 6. Our optimistic would be the best 3 of the last 6. Give our stakeholders some guides. And every time I went into a sprint review, or I went into an executive review where we were actually, there was a little more escalation on the attention of where we were with our delivery, I could go in there and say, hey, based on everything we know now and what's going on, this is our performance on trend. This is, a pessimistic, this is an optimistic. We have holidays coming up. We have, just give them an idea of there could be some impediments. There's some unknown. We've seen in the past that it didn't go as well as we would like for it to have. So there is some unknown going on, but this is our estimation frame of reference. This is how we choose to look at our work, to forecast, and on average, you can see your lines maybe sometimes slip out, but that should be expected sometimes for some of the complexities you don't see, because we're using Scrum as we are in a complex environment. So I really cringe when someone uses the word commitment, unless it's the commitments outlined in the Scrum guide to our artifacts. But it is good to be in alignment. It is good to be very consistent. And then if it's not working for you, there are other options out there, so you can try different things, but make sure everyone's on the same page. And I think that'll bring you better success than definitely anything that's mixed up or misalignment.
Yeah. And what I love about what you were saying is the key point here is to help our stakeholders understand there is uncertainty. We are in a complex, rapidly changing environment where we cannot control the world. This is what Ken taught me in the PSM1 class. You cannot control the universe outside. All you can control, or we can control, is how we respond to the changes in the universe. And what I love about this conversation is it educates usually our stakeholders who might be coming from a waterfall mindset. It educates them to be more open and aware of the uncertainties which are outside the sphere of control, and to tell them we will use empirical evidence of recent performance to make a forecast about likely future performance. And no matter how hard we try, there are times when we'll be wrong. Like right now, Mike and I are in Dallas and the roads are icy. So if someone had asked, how long does it take to go from Mike's home or my home to the airport? The answer is it depends, because if the roads are icy, the answer is different from when the roads are not icy, which is different from when there's construction on the way to the airport. So I think these are the kind of analogies that we might use to use a real world scenarios outside of our software development or any solution development, and explain to our stakeholders the idea of uncertainty and empirical forecasts. Thank you for sharing that, Mike. Last challenge: showing up for sprint planning when we don't have enough actionable and ready items. So this has been something which is a challenge in the beginning. Usually when companies adopt agile methods, business is complaining IT is not fast enough. But then once you get your Scrum team into a rhythm, the power dynamic changes, or the mismatch changes, where the developers start saying there are not enough actionable and ready items for sprint planning. And at times like this, I've seen cases where the product owner is scrambling before sprint planning and putting all kinds of junk in the backlog, not because it's valuable, because they are panicking. Oh my God, I don't want someone to say I didn't have enough ready items. So they are optimizing for busyness. Or the team takes up items which are not ready, and there's pure chaos in the sprint because they're trying to do refinement inside of the sprint. So what has worked for you? How do we protect the company in these situations?
I think what's a good idea is a sprint planning readiness checklist, and it helps at that level to work almost like a 5 why approach. Why are we not ready for sprint planning? Okay, let's set into motion these different things that we know we want to do coming in, set the vision, look at the work ahead of us. What can we do to support the sprint goal? What is the capacity of the team? But we shouldn't be spending that entire time refining stories because we don't have enough stories to work on. I've seen that happen in a client organization where we've had to go in and spend the entire sprint planning working on estimation and working on refining the stories, breaking them down, making sure we have the requirements and all of that. So if you do the 5 why approach and you go back, well, then our refinement was either missing or just not of good quality. We didn't do it well enough. You can use different things. We started experimenting with to go backward and start working on having enough sprint ready items. So one of the favorite things that I learned was having level 1 and level 2 refinements. So level 1, we would have what's the three amigos, your product owner, you'd have the QA and a dev, have them all come together and discuss, this is the business value of the story. These are the details we want to put in of the requirements and what should make it work. That way you're not pulling in unneeded people and wasting time when they could actually be working on the value you want to deliver. Once you have that done, then we would have a level 2 refinement where the whole team comes together. And we would ask, sometimes we might have the time box if the discussions went a little long, but we would talk about, here are the business requirements. Do you have enough information here to be able to gauge your complexity of it and how long it might take, and do we need to break it down further? So that allowed the developers to not waste their time. You didn't have everybody for the team in that didn't need to be there in the moment. Another experiment we had was like, hey, let's do a breakout session where 2 developers pair up. They go out, they look at the items, and they do the research. They come back with their opinions, and they teach back to the rest of the team to make sure that they're all in alignment. And the PO can then say, hey, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. That's what I want. Now you've kind of tackled a lot of things at the same time, come back, you've shortened the discussion for the team once they're all together. You get an alignment on that. Now that helps you out to have your backlog refined a little better. When you go into sprint planning, you're actually doing what you should be doing in sprint planning, which is looking at the outcomes that you want to achieve, formulating your sprint goal, making sure you're pulling in what's realistic to do, and then setting yourself up for success in the sprint for your daily scrums and the different things that you may need to do to pivot during.
Very good. And I love that you brought in the 3 amigos. And I learned about that from Dr. Charles Suschek, who is one of the Scrum.org trainers. In fact, he has a free Scrum Pulse 60-minute webinar on behavior-driven development, integrating behavior-driven development into backlog refinement. So if you're curious about this topic, just go and search the past Scrum Pulse recordings and review, watch the recording and review the slides. So it's been lots of questions coming in. We just have maybe a few more minutes. So I would like to maybe take one question, and then I'd like to start wrapping up by giving you some resources on next steps. So Lindsay, maybe I'll lean on you since you've been monitoring. Are you noticing any patterns about maybe the most prevalent or burning question from the audience?
Well, there's a lot of burning questions here, so that's a loaded question about the questions. Let's see.
Yeah, so maybe
there's a few in here about someone who's new as a Scrum Master. Yeah. And this particular one might resonate with them as well. How would you approach a new team with low agile maturity who think they don't need a Scrum Master when they clearly do?
Ooh, that's a good one.
So for me, what I would think is you want to make sure that they do have some education on the purpose of Scrum and what you're trying to achieve, the outcomes, the relationships, you'll have to still go through the formation of the different dynamics of your relationships within the team. But what I love that Ravi shared with me at one point early on in my career is have one-on-ones, talk with everybody, get in their shoes, see what it is that is going on in their mind, find their pot of gold. What is it that they need out of this? And then, it's sort of like the example Ravi gave me was it's like a bank account. At some point, you're going to need to withdraw from that bank account. So if you have no conflict, you have nothing that you need to address in the moment, you should still be building into that account, talking with everyone, building the relationship, depositing. And then when you have to make that withdrawal, at some point, it becomes a little easier. Perhaps maybe they won't think it's anything but, this is for our team. This is for us we're in alignment on our goals. This helps us to get where we want to go. And I have seen where people think there's not, value to a Scrum Master there. So I really think breaking it down, having one-on-ones, really digging in and finding out where people are in their journey, what their understanding is, and what their buy-in is, and building the relationships, I think you can maybe break down some of those barriers.
Yeah. And what I'd like to add to what Mike said is we can say, yeah, it's possible that we have a high-performing self-managing team, in which case we don't need a Scrum Master. let's use a data-driven approach. How often does the Scrum team deliver sustainable, measurable improvements in business value at the end of every sprint? And you know what? If it turns out that 7 out of 10 times we are able to deliver sustainable, measurable improvements in business outcomes every sprint, you're it. I mean, you're done. You're mature. You are a self-managing team. We don't need a Scrum Master. And then we could help them grow by saying, how do you feel about that? How might we figure out whether or not our team is delivering sustainable, measurable improvements in business outcomes 7 out of 10 times? And that might create, instead of getting locked into an adversarial battle about is a Scrum Master necessary or not, it may channelize that energy and harness it in pursuit of a good for the company. And if they're able to hit that target, you can say, you know what, I'm out of my job and I've done my job and I'll go find another job. But that would be success for me if I help you mature to the point where you don't need a Scrum Master anymore. All right, so a lot of interactive questions. So thank you, Mike. If you can go to the next slide. So if you are curious to learn more, this whole webinar is based on the Scrum.org Applying Professional Scrum workshop, which I feel is one of the most powerful and most underrated workshops in the Scrum.org curriculum. This workshop is about, if I could rebrand it, I would say how to launch or reboot a high-performing Scrum team. So if you have all your questions and not all of them were answered, I would recommend you consider attending a Scrum.org Applying Professional Scrum workshop. Some other free options for you. I've listed these 5 webinars in sequence, webinars or videos. How to reclaim your power as a Scrum Master. That's a webinar that I delivered. How to integrate evidence-based management. This is about outcome-based thinking. How to facilitate sprint reviews. And then there is another webinar on outcome-based thinking and backlog refinement. And finally, how do you increase self-management within a team that appears to be reluctant to self-manage? So please look at these free resources. Next slide, please, Mike. And Scrum.org spends a lot of time in curating high quality content in a step-by-step approach so that you can manage your own learning journey without paying any money. Just invest your time. So I would recommend that you go to the Scrum.org learning paths and pick a path that resonates with you, and then just go through the resources in whatever order they call you. So with that, let's go to the next slide, please. Stay in touch with us on our social media channels. Follow our YouTube channel, follow our handles on LinkedIn, on Twitter, talk to other practitioners on the Scrum.org discussion forum, and look at our blog. We have great content from our trainers coming out every single day. So lots of options for self-paced learning. So with that, we come to this edition of Scrum Pulse. Hope you found this useful. Until we meet again, thank you. Keep calm and Scrum on.